All right, so we got some really huge news here. So what we understand is Kamala Harris is currently surging, and all of the attention right now is on the presidential race. However, there isn't much talk going on about the other branch, the legislative branch, one of the other branches. But what's basically going on here is there's actually a potential kind of pathway where the Democrats could actually win the House, the Senate, and the presidency and have all three at once. It's possible. It's a little bit kind of a little bit of a rough shot, but we have this poll coming out from Montana. This is a Senate poll from Montana. It has Tester +5 on Sheehy, the Republican, 49 to 44%. So this is a lead. And so this seat is likely the most important seat in the entire Senate race, in the entire Senate election, because it likely is going to decide which party is actually going to determine control of the Senate. And so in this poll, it says the Montana Senate race may be the most important Senate race of 2024. If Kamala Harris is elected president, the Montana Senate election will likely determine control of the Senate. A Neapolitan News survey of registered voters found the Democrat Jon Tester currently holds a narrow lead Republican Tim Sheehy in the Montana Senate race, 49 to 44%. It says, on top of that, if Montana voters knew that their vote would determine control of the U.S. Senate, 55% would vote for the Republican and just 37% would vote for the Democrat. 17% of Tester's voters would prefer GOP control of the Senate. This is kind of weird because if you want to advertise how important it is, it kind of makes it tough because it looks like most people are saying that they would vote for the Republican if they knew that their vote was going to determine it. So I don't know if there's a way that the Democrats can heavily invest in Montana, well, without like kind of triggering that sort of anti-vote. But we can look at these Montana polling numbers here. So this RMG research poll, which is kind of like a sus pollster, but they lean red is the weird part. So I feel like they lean red, but they're actually somehow having Tester +5. The other recent polls this one has Sheehy +6. But this August 6th one from The Hill has him only up 2. And then a July 1st poll has him up 5 and 6. But there's a poll now that has him +5 and a poll that has him +2. So it's really, really close. So it's really, really interesting because this is a huge Senate race. If the Democrats are able to win this race, this is what potentially is likely going to happen. So pretty much what's going on here that we can see is, from this map we can see, you can see there that the Democrats would have 50 under this. Now, if Kamala Harris wins the presidential race, Tim Walz would be the tiebreaker in the Senate. So effectively you would have the 50-50 number. Now, what you would need to do is you would need to win Montana. Now, I think that the Mimi Penn states, the Rust Belt states, the senators there are pretty strong incumbent Democrats. So what I think likely is going to happen is they'll all be able to win their races if we, take a look at, if we were to kind of take a look at all these numbers here, where we take a look at these numbers for the Rust Belt senators, we are able to actually see that pretty much all these people are winning pretty solidly. Slotkin is up. I think Slotkin seems to be the most sort of questionable here, but even they're kind of up at that point. And then you have Pennsylvania also. You look at Pennsylvania as well. Casey is up in a lot of polls by double digits. And then you also have Wisconsin as well. So you have in Wisconsin, Baldwin is also winning by close to double digits. So assuming no crazy polling errors, it should be fine. And then the other really, really important seat is actually the Ohio seat for Sherrod Brown. Now, the good thing about Sherrod's seat is he appears to be a pretty strong incumbent. His opponent seems to be kind of weak, but he's winning the poll numbers by about 4 or 5 consistently. There are some potential maybe Ohio polling errors that could occur. Hopefully they don't happen, but barring any kind of extreme polling errors, I think Sherrod Brown probably will hold his seat. Another important one is going to be Arizona, where it's Gallego versus Lake, but Gallego seems to have a really solid lead. And then Carrie Lake is very heavily associated with Donald Trump. And so I think that because it's a first-order election, it's going to be really hard for Lake to win because she's a batshit crazy. She's even crazier than Trump is. But because of their association, they're kind of tied at the hip. So I think if Trump is going to lose the state, which it looks like he's probably going to lose Arizona, it looks like. And this poll that has him even is sponsored by an internal pollster. But, so it's like Republican sponsored. But if, the Democrat wins AZ, it's likely that Lake also is going to lose, especially because they're tied at the hip. That's not always true because of a lot of split ticket voting. But here, I think they're so tied at the hip, I think they're probably going to go one with each other. So those races are all looking good. And so, again, if we kind of look at here, you'd have the 50 for the Democrats with the 48 Democrats and 2 who are independents who caucus with them. Another option would be if you lose Montana, you could pick up the Ted Cruz race in Texas. That could also give you 50-50. This is highly, highly unlikely, however, and so this is probably impossible, so it's really important to be able to win that Montana race. But if you're able to win Montana, Arizona, I think Gallego is going to hold. The seat we're definitely losing is West Virginia. We're definitely losing the West Virginia race. There's pretty much no way that that's going to go blue. The polls are absolutely horrible. That's the one that Manchin is leaving. The Mealy Penn candidates all seem to be pretty solid incumbents. I think Sherrod Brown is also a very solid incumbent, and again, split ticket voting, so it's not like, oh, the president's going to go red, so Ohio's going to go red for the Senate race as well. So it's actually possible you get this majority. Now, unfortunately, with the way that the polling looks like, there's a good chance that it ends up being like this, a 49-51, which would really, really suck. Because if we also look at the other house in the legislature, what we can also see from the poll numbers is it looks like along with Kamala Harris's surge, we can see that something else is also surging. So if we take a look here and we look at the generic ballot poll, which is this is like the number one poll to look at what's going to happen with the House. The Democrats are now winning by 1.1, and it's actually hitting a new peak. And so they've actually never had this 1 point, outside of this one weird like dot on July 18th and 19th, some random weird thing that happens here. Outside of that weird blip, which is obviously recent as well, I don't think they've ever had a 1 point lead at any point here for like a year. So I think the last time they actually had the 1 point lead was actually back here in June of 2023. So you can see that they're actually growing their numbers right now. They're going up and up and up. Ever since, August, basically, and pretty much ever since that happened, the numbers are going up and up and up. So this means that the House, and I think the betting markets are saying the House is going to go blue. Not that that really matters at all. But this means that the Democrats are now leading the generic ballot polls. So you can see with the recent ones, they're leading pretty much every single one. You can see they're leading pretty much every generic ballot poll. And again, this is usually what's used. It's hard to kind of model with the House. There's so many fudging races. With the Senate, there's not that many, right? It's just 100, and there's only a third of it is up for re-election. With the House, it's everybody, and it's 435. So the generic ballot poll is generally considered the biggest one. So you could win the House, and the worry for the Senate worry would end up being that if you have your issue with the Senate, it's that you have someone like a Joe Manchin who, even though you have the 50 votes, is someone going to block that? The good news is Joe Manchin is gone, and Sinema is also gone because Gallego would be the one replacing him. She's leaving, right? So you'd have both of the obstructionist shitwads gone. So they're gone. I don't think Tester is somebody who would do like obstructionist stuff like that. He's been in the Senate. And then I don't think Gallego would do that either. So it would be like low-key, like we'd be replacing the trash basically with something that was at least sort of serviceable and better. And so there's actually a possibility where the Democrats are able to win everything. And right now, I just did another video where, Kamala is now... she's opened up a second path to victory now. Biden was doing poorly in the Sun Belt after doing well in it after winning it in 2020 outside of North Carolina. But now because of the poll numbers where Kamala Harris is now leading in the aggregate for almost all of those states except for I think maybe one or two even in the Sun Belt, she now has this. So it's likely she's going to win. The vibes are too strong. The coconut juice is flowing everywhere. It's on your face right now as you're speaking or as you're watching. I'm speaking. But so there's a legitimate chance. It's kind of hard because of the Senate. The Senate makes it the most difficult. I think the House, I think, is kind of more acceptable. And then the presidency, I think, is it's looking really solid. But it's going to come down to this one race, Montana. So I think the Democrats need to dump a lot into Montana, but somehow they need to avoid triggering this kind of vote here where it's saying that, hey, well, if the voters knew that this was going to decide the election, the Senate, they would vote more Republican than Democrat. I think they got to figure out, okay, how can we dump money in without triggering this anti-vote? But, this is huge, man. So there's a legitimate possibility that this happens, and we should keep an eye out on this. But, just as a summary, the Mealy Penn, the Rust Belt, candidates look really solid. Gallego looks really solid. Sherrod Brown looks really solid. It's Tester, and then if somehow magically, the Texas seat is won, that would be the way. But this could be huge, man, because once Walz is that person, and then there will also be two questions. Are you down to sort of ignore the rules of the parliamentarian and what they say? And then also, are you just down to get rid of the filibuster in its entirety, right? That becomes the other question. So definitely really interesting, and we're going to keep an eye on this. But it is possible that they get all three.